Hey, so you should have just received your first notes packet of the year. Like I mentioned on Friday, you will want to keep track of this. Don't lose it because if you do lose it, you're going to have to write the notes by hand. Um, and that's really awful because I write a lot of it for you already here. I know this packet seems really thick, but that's partially because I don't know what I was thinking when I copied it, and for some reason I didn't do double-sided. But we will be working in this packet for about a month, and hopefully it'll be mainly review from pre-algebra, deal with expressions and equations, which are extremely important for the rest of the year. So make sure that you understand how to do these completely. I like to start all of my notes with a comic. So it says, "Hey, you guys want to meet my new friend?" And then 3 says, "Sure, but where is he?" And 8 says, "He's right here." And then 8 says, "Why can't anyone else see you?" And it says the square root of -1 says beats me. The reason is because some of you may already know this, but we can't do the square root of a negative because there's no number times itself that's going to give you a negative number. So if you have the square root of a negative, it's actually an imaginary number. So this is like his imaginary friend. Apparently 8's not very good at making friends. Okay, so we're going to start off. Notes are pretty short today, talking about variables and expressions. So the first blank that we're going to fill out is expressions, and it might help if I turn this thing on. Okay, so give me 1 second while I load this. Alright, so first blank, like I just said, is expressions. Oh my goodness. Sometimes this thing hates me. Okay, expressions. So expressions, they consist of sums, so addition problems, and or products of numbers and variables with no equal signs. So we will not see any equal signs with an expression. It's just this problem that you can simplify or solve it, but it is not an equation. An equation has an equal sign, expressions do not. So an example of expression might be 2x plus 3. Or you might have just 5x, something like that. Notice we do not see any equal signs, so they're just expressions. Next is variables. Variables are symbols used to represent an unspecified number or values. So variables are just the letters that we see. So X and N are most commonly used. I like to stay away from S because they look like fives. If I use L, I make it cursive. If I use Z, I'm going to put a line through it so it doesn't look like a 2. And never, ever, ever use it O because it looks like a 0. So make sure that you're picking variables that don't look like numbers. And then we have term. A term is any number, any variable, or the product or quotient of numbers and variables. So some examples of terms could be 3. That's a term. X is a term. 3x. That 3 got kind of funky. Okay. 3x is a term. X over 3 is a term. So if I gave you an expression, say I gave you the one that I wrote up here, 2x plus 3. We would say that this had 2 terms. So it's kind of like each part of the expression. 2x is a term, 3 is a term, so there are 2 terms. Each term will always be separated by addition or subtraction. Next we are going to read these words called verbal expressions, and we are going to write it as an algebraic expression. The algebraic part tells us that we're going to have a variable. The expression part tells us no equal sign. So if you want to write that to yourself, just so you know, algebraic means put a variable in it, expression means no equal sign. So 5 less than a number. Whenever we're dealing with less than or subtraction in some way, we got to be very careful because some people would just write 5 minus some number. but it's actually the opposite here. So one way to think about it is I like to think 5 less than, what if the number was 3? Well, 5 less than 3, that's negative 2. So we're actually taking the number minus 5. So I'm just going to pick a variable. I'm going to pick n. And oh, sorry, they told me what variable to pick. C, and then 5 less. So c minus 5 would be my expression. So be very careful with subtraction. If it helps to plug in a number for this number that you don't know, and think about what would I get if I just plugged in a random number, that might be a good idea. Number 2, 9 plus the product, so that's multiplication, of 2 and d. So this is telling me I'm going to multiply 2 and d, and I always like to write the variable first if there's no subtraction involved. So 2d plus 9. That would be my expression. So think about what all the words mean. In algebra, we will typically put the variable first. So that's what I like to do. 2/5 of the area A. The word of means to multiply. So we could write 2/5 times A. So you could put the A right next to it. You could put a times sign in between if you wanted. You could put the A in parentheses. Now another way to do this is the same thing as 2/5 times A over 1. And if I do that, I get 2 times A is 2A. 5 times 1 is 5. So another way to write that is just stick the variable on the top. So whichever one works for you is fine. Both are correct. Just some people like to put the variable on top. Some people like to put it off to the side. Okay, number 4. Mr. Miller bought 2 adult tickets and 3 student tickets for the planetarium show. Write an algebraic expression that represents the cost of the tickets. So again, algebraic means I'm going to use some variable. Expression means no equal sign. Well, I don't know the cost of the adult tickets or the cost of student tickets. I can assume that they're going to be a different price. Otherwise, they wouldn't have specified. So whenever we have a situation where we need to use a variable, they don't tell us what variable to use, we're going to make one up, and we're going to do something called defining the variable. Defining the variable just means you're going to say what the variable stands for. So I'm going to use A is going to be my adult. And some people want to use S for student. That's fine, but make sure your S looks like or doesn't look like a 5. I'm going to use X for student. Okay, so I have 2 adult, so 2A. I'm also buying, so I'm going to add 3 students, so 3x. Now that's an expression because there's no equal sign, and I'm going to circle it where I actually like to box things. I don't know why. But if I say circle it, I'll oftentimes box it for some reason. Okay, number 5, Mr. Martinez orders 250 keychains printed with his athletics team logo and 500 pencils printed with their web address. Write an algebraic expression that represents the cost of the order. So again, algebraic tells me variable, expression, no equal sign. They didn't tell me the variables to use, so I'm going to use K for my keychains and P for pencils. So again, always make sure you tell us what the variables stand for. So 250 keychains means 250K. I'm also going to get, so I'm going to add 500 pencils. And that's an expression because there's no equal sign, and I am done. Okay, so that concludes our notes today. You're going to want to keep this in either a folder or a binder, so don't lose it. And the sub should be passing out your math homework. Remember I mentioned this on Friday, you are only doing the Monday section. So once you get your paper, you should only be doing the first 5 questions. And then on Tuesday when I come back, I will come around, make sure everyone did it by putting my initial by the day. If you have any questions, feel free to email me.